As football and sporting fan tokens continue to grow in popularity, the projects like Chiliz that back them are seeing explosive moves. But what are some of the risks in the current environment to be aware of before making an investment? What is going on, coin traders? Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today. We're looking at Chiliz, CHZ on that ticker. Been a very big and popular growing one with a lot of the NFT boom and also with a lot of the sporting token, the fan tokens anyway, gaining a lot of that popularity. So we're not going to dive too much into the project. We'll touch base on it really quick and briefly here just to make an understanding. But pretty much when we have a chart set up like this, we need to be aware of a lot of the risks in the current market space and also make a plan accordingly so that way we are risk conscious in that manner and that way you don't get burned and wrecked. So yeah, if that all sounds good and you're ready to talk about Chiliz, smash that free like button, let's go. So surprisingly enough, we're actually not starting out on Twitter today, but first I do want to talk about what CHZ or the Chiliz token actually is. Now, actually, I shouldn't even call it a token, it is its own cryptocurrency since it is built on the Chiliz blockchain. But anyway, so you have this site socios.com, which is a fan engagement platform, and it is built from the ground up on the Chiliz blockchain infrastructure, and it does use that CHZ as its exclusive on-platform currency. So socios.com allows these fans to purchase these branded tokens for some of the biggest renowned sports teams. Now, sports teams do keep getting added to this list, so we're gonna see this gain popularity, which also means a lot of usage, which means that more demand and traffic on the network, which should in theory apply to the CHZ as well, right? Okay, so fan tokens bought on socios.com allow users to influence their teams via popular vote and become eligible for engagement-based team rewards and recognition. All fan tokens are minted using Chiliz blockchain, and all on-platform voting is executed as a series of smart contracts which runs through the Chiliz blockchain. Yeah, so since we're already off the ground here, we've already seen a lot more growth and a lot more of that drive and hype and popularity for this type of platform, specifically with a lot of these other fan tokens. Now picture just millions and millions of fans being supportive for a team token, so you're actually going to have a lot of interest based off of just a huge fan pool for that specific fan token. I think this site really sums it up pretty good, a digital currency for sports entertainment platforms. So Chiliz actually does have its own token exchange where you can trade for a lot of these different fan tokens, and it is based off of the Chiliz pair. So think of it kind of like Binance, where it's like the BNB coin, for example. So that's one of the things that's going to drive a lot of demand for it as well, is that it is going to be offered as that trading pair. Now, the exchange itself is blocked from the US, so currently I did have to go on my VPN to a UK-based IP in order to access the Chiliz.net exchange, but we do know that they're going to be investing $50 million for expansion into the US. So we're going to see a lot of growth for it overall as a whole. Now, we know we are in the middle of a very nice big bull run for this overall crypto space, but there's still a lot of risks associated with a chart setup and a project like this, given the current conditions and such a euphoric state. So the first thing I want to do is jump over here to this weekly chart, because this is just an absurd pattern, and we've seen cryptos play out with this type of pattern before, and this is never sustainable. Now, I know that there's always a lot of justifications, like it's different this time, and it's a good project, and I don't understand, and it's got a great use case and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, we do look at cryptocurrencies as a financial market, because first and foremost, they are financial markets, and they do always behave as such. And it's just the same thing with everything. So it'll happen with Bitcoin despite the popularity growing. It'll always happen no matter how great and good a project is. The financial market aspect of it will always take over, and it's always going to make the same result happen. So not trying to spread a lot of FUD, but just want to make sure that I highlight the risks with a chart setup that's just kind of like a right angle like this, where that's a horrible drawing, where we just see consolidation on this longer term floor, no price action, and then just vertical. There's not a single chart setup in the whole crypto space you can show me that looks like this that hasn't resulted in the same fashion. And we can actually take a look at several of them and kind of, so for example, like if we look at Dogecoin, specifically more if we look at it on the daily, we're pretty much looking at the same type of pattern, more or less flat vertical, right? We obviously know what happened there. Huge pullback, right? So let's look at what it was for Dogecoin. So we were looking at almost an 80%. So yeah, about 78 to 80% pullback from the all-time high down to where we did find a bounce and support. Now, I'm not trying to say that prices always pull back and end up staying here. In fact, in this case, you can't see that we rallied and we're actually a lot higher. So that's not the point I'm trying to drive home here. But basically just want to point out how these charts always have this same result, right? Vertical shoot up move, huge pullback. It always happens in these type of chart setups. In a financial market, will always have the same result. Let's see, let's actually look at Link over the summer too, and let's switch into the... Now, Link's not as much as what it was for Dogecoin. We aren't even as vertical, but pretty much this same type of pattern, more or less flat, and then a lot of this euphoria does step in as these cryptos do hit the spotlight. Once that happens, that shoots up the price and drives a lot of investor interest in and all of that stuff. And then ultimately, we do know that this is not sustainable, and we do see these huge sky shoot moves, and then ultimately there is a pullback. So for Chainlink over the summer, we were looking at about 63% from the previous all-time high down to where we did find a floor at and where we did bounce. So we typically know that cryptos are always going to pull back between 60 to 80% on those huge moves. So another one we could look at would be OMG, for example. So yeah, if we look at OMG, pretty much right over the summer, flat and then huge vertical move. And then right after that, big pullback. So if we look at the pullback in this instance, yes, we're looking at about 75%. So pretty much like we were talking about, 60 to 80% gonna be what we expect to see pull back. And that's a pretty huge and substantial amount. So I definitely talk about this type of move on the channel a lot. So if you are returning to the channel, you should hopefully know that these type of moves on a chart should just scare the out of you. Now, I definitely don't want anyone to accuse me of spreading FUD because that's not what I'm trying to do here, because overall I actually think Chiliz is a pretty cool and unique project. And I think it actually will get a lot of demand and usage. And yeah, it definitely will be a great growing thing, especially as more sport teams and other soccer teams and things like that do get branded with their own type of sport fan token. But just realistically understand that when prices are exploding and just shooting up this much in this short of a time, this is never sustainable, and it always gets met with a huge pullback. Pretty much we're just trying to figure out a matter of time because we know that it will happen. It's literally just a matter of when at this point. And you know, quite frankly, we could continue to go vertical for quite a while. Obviously, no one's going to know that, and there's a lot more risks with that, but if that does happen, then we'd pull back huge as well. Not claiming to say we're going to top out or we're going to go higher or anything like that, just making sure that everyone knows when we see huge chart patterns like this, this is extremely scary and extremely risky, especially if you're entering right now on this type of level, considering we have grown, let's see, yeah, 1,100% in about 2 weeks. So definitely don't FOMO, because protecting yourself from any downside risk, which is inevitable at this point, is much better than worrying about potentially leaving money on the table and getting some of these gains. So if we did look at potentially a 60 to 80% pullback, we could be looking at prices being between about 16.5 cents on the US dollar pairing down to more likely and realistically, I would think down to about 80% pullback. Probably would be the 10 cent psychological would be a little bit more on that realistic scenario. Now, since we're talking about percentages, just looking at how much we are above this 12-period EMA on this weekly, we're 300% above this 12-period EMA on this weekly. That's just absolutely insane and completely absurd. So with that out of the way, how do you actually trade this right now, assuming you do? We will talk about that. So the good thing right now is that we are still very much euphoric, which does mean that we are going to be looking at the shorter time frame charts first. So for example, if you look at the hourly, you can actually see that we're maintaining uptrends on all of this, right? So we do see big moves, long periods of consolidation, holding a floor, kicking off these exponential moving averages, and then seeing more upside. So when we have moves that are just completely vertical on some of the longer time frames, we know that a lot of those moves are driven by the shorter term charts first. So that's why we always look at charts like this, like the hour and the 15-minute and things like that. So if we look at the 15-minute right now, you can see the chart pattern. We haven't lost that and broken bearish from it yet. So right now, we still do think that there's a bit more upside to this move. And pretty much what we always know and expect to happen is that these moves will go into a period of consolidation. And then if they don't actually break bullish from that, and they actually do break bearish, that's pretty much going to be one of the very first trigger signs that likely that sell-off is going to start. Because once we lose the trend on the shorter time frame charts, that means we can then focus on shifting the trend on some of the longer time frame charts. So right now, we're not really at risk of seeing that top come in, and we actually do have a little bit more upside momentum still, which is a good thing for the bulls. But just know the increasing likelihood of a consolidation and ultimately a bearish break is going to keep getting higher and higher and higher. So overall, looking at the longer time frame charts, but still being bullish on the shorter term charts, that would actually prevent me from having a lot of my portfolio at risk in something like this. Like I've talked about in some previous videos too, if you enter very quick right off of this initial break and you're actually catching this whole shooting move to the upside, if you catch it down when your risk is low, you can actually have more of your portfolio at risk when prices are this high, because ultimately you could pull back a little bit and still be very profitable. But with that said, if you do make an entry at this level, you need to be extremely quick to take those profits on the way up, just because your risk of having a huge pullback, like we mentioned, potentially up to 80%, just gets bigger and bigger and bigger the higher and higher and higher prices do get. So just absolutely make sure you're aware of that. And it's easy to be blinded by prices shooting up 50% in a day, but know that that's not sustainable at all, and that there does need to be a very quick and solid exit strategy if you are entering and FOMOing in at these prices. So again, I do want to point out that this is not specific to Chiliz, and I'm not trying to call out the project or the blockchain at all. Pretty much, I'm just making sure everyone's aware of chart patterns like this is first and foremost. So it really has nothing to do with Chiliz or the Chiliz blockchain or the project overall. I'm simply pointing out that no matter what chart setup it is like this, there's always that huge risk, and there should actually be a very minimal amount of your portfolio balance exposed if you do want to be in this type of position. So yeah, high risk, high reward, but right now when we're seeing setups like this, it's mostly going to end up being high risk, and that likelihood of a huge pullback is ultimately inevitable on the horizon. It's just kind of a matter of when. But like I said, we always look at these shorter time frame charts first. So since right now we're in a very actually bullish setup, nice move to the upside, consolidation, upside, consolidation, upside, consolidation, upside. And then now we will probably go into some type of consolidation, I would assume. Maybe another leg up, I don't really know. But yeah, ultimately when we do lose uptrends on these shorter charts, that's going to be the indication that that huge flush is coming. So just know if you do want to have a little bit of your portfolio at risk, that's fine, but be aware of those reversal signals and what would actually happen should that occur. And definitely make sure you have that exit strategy and you stick to it, because once this flush comes, it'll be very quick and very strong, which definitely does mean a lot of panic, a lot of fear, and then a lot of panic selling and all of that other stuff. So it's always best to avoid being in those type of scenarios that could potentially expose yourself to just so much downside risk in the first place. But yeah, just make sure overall at the end of the day, you do have a very well and buttoned down risk management strategy, because this chart setup is just extremely risky. All right, so got the VPVR turned on, the volume profile visible range, which is the volume for price level, and also the volume down at the bottom, which is volume based off of time. One of the important things is that on each of these daily moves to the upside, we're seeing lower highs on the amount of bullish volume coming in. So this is likely a big symbol that a lot of the buying pressure is starting to get exhausted. So we could be looking at that top starting to form before too long. Now, when we look at the volume over here for the VPVR based off of price level, we typically try to use this as a guide for support and resistances on top of actual price levels that we see in the chart. When we see a lot of volume coming in for a specific price range, we know that likely there's going to be a lot of support and resistance at that zone. So one of the things that we're looking at right now is we actually don't have much volume on the VPVR until we get down to about the 15-cent level, which is kind of where we end up seeing a little bit more volume anyway. And then down past that, then pretty much we are looking at about the 7-cent down to about the 5-cent being that downside target, and then, you know, plenty of volume down below that, which is where we had this long period of accumulation. So definitely gonna be plenty of volume there. Honestly, I don't really expect prices to get down this low, but I think, yeah, overall 15 cent could be a very nice downside target to be looking at for when prices finally do see that pullback and do retrace to ultimately test and confirm supports. Not a super fun and exciting show today, but just understanding risk and risk management is a huge and definitely overlooked part of this whole crypto space. So definitely want to point it out to everyone and make sure everyone is extremely aware of all the risks and possible downside scenarios we're looking at in this instance. And with that, that is going to go ahead and wrap up the show for today, though. Hope you all enjoyed and learned something about risk management and chart setups that are just super explosive like this. Congrats once again to the Chiliz Bulls. Definitely exciting, and if you're making huge tons of money on this, definitely great, and not trying to knock that at all. But yeah, at the end of the day, just make sure you are aware of the potential downside risk for a setup like this. Do post all your predictions, comments, disagreements, all other stuff below down in the comment section. Love getting back to you all. Also, if you haven't done so already, would appreciate you hitting those thumbs up, like, and subscribe buttons. Definitely helps out the channel and lets me know you're enjoying all of the content. Thanks again for all the continued love and support as always, everyone. Take care. I'll catch you back in the next video.